Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerCoaching.com, here to explain how to use our Progressive Knockout Bounty Tournament Calculator. This bounty calculator is not going to give you the 100% perfect value of the bounties you can collect in these games because they do change based on numerous things like field size, exact number of players remaining, the way players bust out in tournaments, etc. But it's going to give you a very, very close approximation that will allow you to make good decisions in game. So let's take a look at an example and use the calculator to figure out what you should do. So let's say we're in a $33 progressive knockout tournament where each player starts with 25,000 chips. The small blind goes all in for 200,000 chips at 10,000, 20,000, and we have to decide if we should call in the big blind. So we're going to need to answer all of these questions to figure out if we should call. So how much of the field is remaining? That's going to be very relevant. How many starting bounties do they have? How many chips is their bounty worth? How much equity do we properly need to call? What's their shoving range? And then finally, which hands can profitably call? So let's assume that 10% of the field remains, and let's assume that our opponent has 12 starting bounties on them. So let's go through and enter this information. So we're playing a $33 tournament with 25,000 starting stacks. Okay? So as we can see here, there are instructions. Enter the tournament buy-in. Okay, let's do it. Enter the starting stack. All right, 25,000. And enter the villain's displayed bounty. So they have 12 bounties. In this scenario, let's get out our calculator. In game, you would take whatever their bounty is and divide it by 8.25. But we're going to do 8.25 times 12 to figure out what it is in this scenario. I think it's 99. Yep, okay. So 99 goes here. So if you were playing in the game, the villain's displayed bounty would be 99. Now, this gives us the value of the amount of chips to add to the pot based on the percentage of the field that remains in the tournament. I said we were down to the final 10% of the field, so we're going to add this amount, 109,500, to the pot to determine how much equity we need to call. If this was somehow earlier in the tournament, let's say only 20% of the people left and 80% of the players remained, you would add 78,000 to the pot. But now we're down to the final 10%, so we're going to be adding this number to the pot. One more thing I want to mention before we move forward is that you may be playing on a site that does not display the bounty the same as I assume here. In this tournament, I'm assuming it's a $33 buy-in, a 50-50 structure, which is what this calculator is for. If your structure is different, you'll need different calculations. But 50-50 is the structure that's played on essentially all sites and all games. In this scenario, the displayed bounty should be 25% of the starting stack when you buy into the tournament. So if you buy into the tournament and you're playing a $33 game and the bounty shown for each player is $8.25, then you can just use this chart as it makes sense. And this is going to be the case on most sites. But a few sites will display this number as half of the buy-in, okay? And if that's the case, you are going to need to make sure you account for that and essentially assume that villain's displayed bounty, whatever is displayed on those particular sites, take that number, divide it by 2, because this is displaying the entire bounty, not what you get paid if you bust someone, okay? But for most sites, this is going to be how it is laid out, which is why I have it laid out this way. So anyway, in this scenario, 10% of the field remains. We're going to add 109,500 to the pot. All right, so let's assume 12 starting bounties, adding 109,500 to the pot. Is that correct? Let's make sure we got this right. 109,500. Okay, so now we just do a regular equity calculation. If this is unfamiliar to you, make sure you check out pokercoaching.com/fundamentals. So now we have to go through and do this equation. So let's get out our calculator, handy dandy calculator. We do 180,000 divided by the total pot we can win. Notice we have to call 180,000 more because we already have 20 in the pot, right? So we have to put in, or we're trying to win our 200,000, our opponent's 200,000, the ante, plus the value of the bounty. Okay? So in this scenario, this is what we end up with. All right, so we have 180 divided by 400, 509.5, 529.5 divided by 500, 529.5 equals we need 33, let's call it 34% equity to call. Notice that this was not a bounty tournament. It would just be this number here, 180 divided by 420. Okay, so we need 34% equity at least to call in this scenario. All right, let's assume they're going to shove 60% of hands. Your opponent may shove more, they may shove less. Who actually knows what they're going to shove? But let's presume your opponent shoves 60% of hands. Okay, so you take Equalab. This is a free download. Just search Equalab on Google. It'll come right up. You go to Tools, Hand Range Calculator. And now we needed 34% equity to break even. Let's presume we want to have a little bit of an edge. Let's say we want to have 35% to break even. Click on Calculate Range, take the main window, and you see in this scenario, we should call almost everything. Why are we calling their, how many big blinds is this? Roughly 8 big blind all in with almost everything. Well, it's because their bounty is very relevant. They have a lot of bounties on them for this stage of the tournament. Okay? By the way, if this was a normal tournament, let's just do the math on that real quick. It was 180 divided by 420, which equals 43%. So with this bounty, this rather large bounty, you see you're supposed to call with 81% of hands, right? What you can do to figure out a regular tournament is we go to Hand Range Calculator again, make this number 43, calculate range, take the main window. So instead of calling with 81% with this big bounty, we would actually only call with 46%. So way, way, way fewer hands, right? So in this scenario, the bounty is very, very relevant. All right, what if the opponent was shoving tighter? Let's just take a look at this real quick. I'm going to show you we should still call pretty wide. Let's presume instead of shoving 60%, let's say they're shoving 35% of hands, so pretty tight. Go over to Hand Range Calculator with no payout implications. We would call very tight probably. Yeah, to 29% of hands if there were no bounty. But with a bounty, remember we needed 34%. Oops, I ran this wrong. When you're running this, you got to delete the bottom range here. We're just concerned about our opponent's range. All right, calculate range. So with no bounty, we call 29%, but with a bounty, even against a tight range, we call 68% of the time, so a whole lot more. When the bounty's big, you got to try to collect it. What if instead of having 12 starting bounties, though, the opponent only had 2 starting bounties? Well, now this would be 16.5, right? We're down to the final 10% of the players, and now we'd only add 18,000 to the pot. So instead of this number being 109, it would be 18,000 or whatever it was. We would get out our calculator, do the math. It'd be 420 plus 18, so that's 438. So 180 divided by 438 equals 41% equity, which was almost the same. Remember, 43 is if there were no payout implications, right? So you see, if the bounty was much smaller here, if they only had 2 bounties instead of 12, we would be calling way, way, way less often. So always make sure you account for the value of the bounties and use this bounty calculator to give you roughly the value of the bounties. So remember, all you need to do, enter the tournament buy-in amount, enter the bounty, enter the starting stack, whatever it is, and then enter the villain's displayed bounty amount. Notice here, like if the stacks were 5,000 to start the tournament, then we'd be adding fewer chips to the pot. Okay? So that's how you use this. Always make sure, again, it's 33, and this number here is 25%. That should all calculate automatically. This is for the 50-50 structure. And you should be good to go. That way, you will roughly know when or how many chips you should add to the pot when you can collect a bounty.